My dear friends, today I invite you to journey with me into a story that stirs the heart and challenges the soul. It is a story found in the sacred pages of the Book of Judges, chapter 19, a tale that speaks of a time when humanity wandered far from the light of God's love, yet within its shadows we find lessons that resonate even now. Imagine, if you will, a land chosen by God, a people called to be a beacon of hope. But in the days of the judges, this land was shrouded in chaos. There was no king to guide them, no shared vision to unite their hearts. Each soul walked their own path, and in doing so, many drifted from the sacred covenant that bound them to one another and to God. This was a time when justice was forgotten, when compassion grew faint, and when the moral compass of a nation spun wildly without direction. Yet, even in such darkness, God's presence remained, whispering through the lives of the broken, calling them and us to seek the light once more. In this story, we meet a man, a Levite from the hill country of Ephraim, and a woman, his concubine, from the city of Bethlehem. Their lives, like so many in that time, were marked by choices that led them far from harmony. The woman, for reasons we are not fully told, left her husband and returned to her father's house. Perhaps she sought refuge, perhaps she felt lost. We do not judge her, for who among us has not, at times, sought to flee from pain or confusion? But the Levite, moved by a desire to restore what was broken, set out to Bethlehem to bring her back. Picture him walking through the rugged hills, his heart heavy with hope and uncertainty. This was no simple journey, my friends. It was a pilgrimage toward reconciliation, though neither he nor she could foresee the tragedy that awaited. When he arrived, the woman's father welcomed him with warmth, urging him to stay, to share in meals and rest. For days, they lingered in this fragile peace, as if delaying the inevitable return to the uncertainties of their life together. Yet, the time came to depart, and with the woman by his side, the Levite set out toward home. As the sun began to set, they found themselves near the city of Gibeah, a place within the tribe of Benjamin. Here, my dear friends, the story takes a turn that pierces the heart. They sought shelter, a simple act of trust in the hospitality of their kin. But Gibeah, like the world around it, was a city that had forgotten the sacred duty to welcome the stranger, to protect the vulnerable. An old man, himself a sojourner in Gibeah, saw them in the town square and opened his home to them. "Come," he said, "rest under my roof, for the night is no time to linger alone." His kindness was a flicker of light in the gathering darkness, a reminder that even in troubled times, goodness can still be found. But as they sat together, sharing bread and stories, a shadow fell upon the house. A mob, consumed by wickedness, surrounded them, demanding that the Levite be handed over to their cruelty. The air grew thick with fear, and the sacred bonds of humanity began to unravel. What does it mean, my friends, to stand in such a moment? To face a world that has lost its way? This is not merely a story of one night in Gibeah, it is a mirror held before us, asking, what do we do when darkness surrounds us? Do we cling to hope, or do we surrender to despair? Let us pause here, for this story is not one to rush through. It asks us to sit with its weight, to feel the trembling hearts of those caught in its unfolding. The Levite, the woman, the old man, they are not so different from us. They, too, longed for safety, for love, for a world where justice reigns. As we continue, we will see how this night in Gibeah becomes a wound that echoes through a nation, a wound that calls for healing, for justice, and, above all, for mercy. Let us walk this path together, seeking the wisdom that God offers even in the darkest of tales. The descent into darkness. My dear friends, as we continue this sacred journey through the story of Judges, we stand at the threshold of a moment that tests the very fabric of our humanity. In the house of the old man in Gibeah, where the Levite and his concubine sought refuge, a storm of evil gathers. Let us hold this scene gently in our hearts, for it speaks not only of one night long ago, but of the choices we face when confronted with cruelty and fear. The old man, with kindness in his heart, had welcomed the travelers into his home. They shared a meal, their voices mingling in the flickering light of the hearth. For a moment, it seemed that the chaos of the world outside could not touch them. But then, the sound of angry voices broke the night, a mob, driven by malice, pounding at the door, demanding the Levite be given to them for their wicked desires. Imagine the fear that gripped those within. The Levite, a guest in a strange city, far from the safety of his hills. The woman, silent beside him, her heart perhaps racing with memories of her own journey. and the old man torn between his duty to protect and the terror of what lay beyond his walls. In this moment, my friends, we see a world unmoored from God's love, a world where the sacred dignity of each person is trampled underfoot. What does it mean to be a stranger in such a place? To seek shelter and find instead a threat that chills the soul? These are not questions for Gibeah alone, they echo in our own time, in the cries of those who seek safety and find rejection, in the silence of those who suffer while others turn away. But the story grows darker still, and I ask you to walk with me through this shadow, not to dwell in despair, but to seek the light that even now God offers. The old man, desperate to protect his guest, made a choice that pierces our hearts with sorrow. "Take my daughter," he pleaded with the mob, or the Levite's concubine, "but do not harm this man." Oh, my friends, how these words wound us. In his fear, the old man offered the vulnerable to save the one he deemed his duty to protect. And the Levite, silent, perhaps paralyzed by terror, did not intervene as his concubine was pushed toward the door. She, a woman who had walked beside him, who had shared his journey, was cast out into the hands of those who knew no mercy. The night passed in horror. While the house grew quiet, the woman endured unspeakable cruelty at the hands of the mob. As dawn broke, she crawled back to the threshold of the house, her strength spent, her body broken. There, at the doorstep, she lay, alone, abandoned, a silent testament to the failure of those who should have protected her. Let us pause here, my dear ones, and hold her in our hearts. She is not merely a figure in a story, she is every soul who has been forsaken, every voice that has been silenced, every life diminished by the indifference of others. Her suffering calls us to look upon our own world and ask, where have we turned away from those in need? Where have we failed to stand for the vulnerable? The Levite awoke to find her there, motionless at the door. "Get up," he said, his voice perhaps trembling, perhaps hardened by the night's terror. But she did not answer. She could not answer. Her life had been taken, not only by the mob but by the choices of those who stood by the old man's compromise, by the Levite's silence, by a city that had forgotten the sacred call to love one another as God loves us. What do we do with such a moment, my friends? Do we turn away, unable to bear its weight? Or do we let it awaken in us a deeper resolve to live differently, to build a world where no one is cast out, where no one is left to face the darkness alone? This story does not end with the dawn, for the Levite's actions will ripple outward, stirring a nation to anger and vengeance. But before we continue, let us sit with this woman's suffering, with the choices that led to her fate. Let us ask God to soften our hearts, to give us the courage to stand against injustice, and to teach us the mercy that heals where cruelty has wounded. The path ahead is heavy, but we walk it together, guided by the hope that even in the darkest night, God's light is never far away. We stand now at a turning point in this sacred story where grief and horror give way to a response that shakes the very foundations of a nation. The dawn in Gibeah has revealed a tragedy beyond words. The concubine of the Levite lies dead at the doorstep, her life stolen by cruelty and betrayal. Yet, as we gather here to reflect, let us not turn away from what follows, for it is in these moments of reckoning that we are called to seek God's wisdom and grace. The Levite, awakening to find his companion lifeless, faced a moment that could have broken any heart. Picture him standing there, the weight of the night pressing upon him. What does one do when confronted with such loss? We might hope for tears, for a cry of sorrow, for a plea to God for mercy. But the Levite chose a path that startles us, a path that speaks of a heart hardened by pain or perhaps consumed by a desire to awaken a sleeping nation. He lifted her body, not to mourn her in the quiet of his grief, but to carry her home to the hills of Ephraim. There, in a decision that echoes through the ages, he took a knife and divided her broken body into 12 pieces, one for each tribe of Israel. With each piece, he sent a message, a silent but searing cry: look upon this horror. See what has been done in Gibeah. Will you remain silent? Oh, my friends, how this act unsettles us. It is not the way of mourning we might expect, not the gentle laying to rest of one who suffered. Yet, in its stark brutality, it was a call to awaken a people who had grown numb to injustice, who had wandered far from the covenant that bound them to God and to one another. Each piece was a summons, a challenge to the tribes to rise from their indifference and face the darkness that had taken root among them. Across the land, from Dan to Beersheba, the pieces arrived, and with them came a wave of outrage. The elders gathered, their voices trembling with shock and fury. "What is this abomination?" they cried. "How has such evil come to pass in Israel?" The story of Gibeah spread like wildfire, igniting hearts that had long been dulled by chaos. Men and women, young and old, felt the sting of shame and the call to act. This, my dear ones, is the power of a single story to stir a nation. But let us pause and ask ourselves, what does it mean to respond to such a cry? The Levites' act was a demand for justice, yet it was also a spark that could set a forest ablaze. When we are wounded, when we see evil flourish, our hearts long for retribution, for the scales to be balanced. But is vengeance the path to healing? Or does it risk deepening the wounds we seek to mend? The tribes of Israel, united in their anger, turned their gaze toward Gibeah, toward the tribe of Benjamin whose land had harbored this crime. "We cannot let this pass," they declared. "We must stand for what is right, for the dignity of the one who was lost, for the soul of our people." Their resolve was firm, their hearts aflame with a righteous zeal. Yet, in their fervor, they stood at a crossroads, one path leading to justice tempered by mercy, the other to a cycle of violence that could consume them all. My friends, this moment in the story is not merely a tale of ancient Israel, it is a mirror for our own hearts. How often have we, in our pain, sought to right a wrong with anger rather than understanding? How often have we cried out for justice only to find that our actions sow division rather than unity? The Levites' call was heard, but the question remains, what kind of justice will prevail? Let us hold this question close as we prepare to walk further, for the tribes are gathering and the shadow of war looms on the horizon. Together, let us seek the guidance of God, who sees beyond our anger to the healing that only love and mercy can bring. We gather once more to walk through the sacred yet sorrowful pages of the story where the cry of a single tragedy has stirred the heart of a nation. The pieces of the concubine's body, sent by the Levite to the 12 tribes of Israel, have done their work. From every corner of the land, voices rise in unison, demanding justice for the horror that unfolded in Gibeah. But as we step forward, let us tread carefully, for the path of justice is fraught with peril when it is paved with anger alone. The tribes of Israel came together, their faces set like stone, their hearts burning with a shared resolve. At Mizpah they assembled hundreds of thousands strong, men of valor, elders, and those who could no longer bear the weight of silence. "We will not return to our homes," they vowed, "until the evil of Gibeah is answered, until the tribe of Benjamin accounts for this crime." Imagine the scene, my friends, a sea of people united not by joy but by grief, their voices echoing across the hills. They sent word to the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "Deliver to us those who committed this wickedness, that we may purge this evil from Israel." It was a call for accountability, a plea that justice might be served without bloodshed. But Benjamin, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of fear, refused. "We will stand by our own," they declared, and with those words the die was cast. Oh, how quickly a wound can become a war. The tribes of Israel prepared for battle, their swords sharpened, their shields raised. Benjamin, too, rallied its warriors, determined to defend their ground. The air grew heavy with the promise of violence, and the land that God had given as a place of promise now stood on the brink of tearing itself apart. As the armies faced each other, my dear ones, let us pause to reflect. What does it mean to seek justice in this way? The tribes were right to be outraged, evil cannot be ignored, and the cry of the oppressed must be heard. Yet, when we take up arms, when we let fury guide our hands, do we not risk becoming what we oppose? The concubine's death was a wound upon the soul of Israel, but could a war truly heal it? The battle began with a fury that shook the earth. Swords clashed, spears flew, and the cries of the fallen rose like a lament to the heavens. The tribes of Israel, driven by their righteous anger, struck with relentless force. Benjamin fought back, their courage fierce, but their cause marred by the sin they had shielded. Day after day, the conflict raged, and the fields of Gibeah were stained with the blood of brothers. My friends, picture the cost of this war, not only in lives lost, but in the fracturing of a people meant to be one. Each warrior who fell was a son, a father, a friend. Each blow struck was a wound upon the heart of Israel itself. And yet, the fighting continued, for the fire of vengeance is not easily quenched. The tribes pressed forward, believing that victory would bring justice, that punishment would restore what was broken. But let us ask ourselves, what is justice without mercy? What is victory if it leaves only ruins? As the battles raged, some among the tribes began to wonder. In the quiet moments between clashes, they looked upon the faces of their enemies, men of Benjamin, their kin, and saw not monsters but brothers. Could there be another way? Could the cycle of pain be broken, not by more death, but by a courage greater than the sword? This, my dear friends, is the question that hangs over Gibeah, over Israel, and over us today. When we are wronged, when we see evil flourish, our hearts cry out for justice. But God calls us to a higher path, one where justice is tempered by love, where healing comes not from vengeance but from forgiveness. The war is not yet over, and the story of Judges presses us forward. Let us hold fast to hope, seeking the wisdom of God, who sees beyond our anger to the peace that only He can bring. Together, let us walk this difficult path, trusting that even in the fire of conflict, the light of mercy can still shine. The ashes of victory. My dear friends, we stand now amidst the echoes of a great and terrible conflict where the clash of swords has given way to an unsettling silence. The tribes of Israel, driven by their cry for justice, have waged war against their brothers in Benjamin, seeking to purge the evil of Gibeah from their midst. But as the dust settles and the cries of battle fade, we are called to look upon what remains, not with pride, but with humility, not with triumph, but with a heart open to God's wisdom. The battles were fierce, my friends, and the cost was heavy. The warriors of Benjamin, though brave, could not withstand the united strength of Israel. Their cities burned, their fields lay desolate, and their people were scattered. The tribes of Israel stood victorious, their banners raised over the ruins of Gibeah. Yet as they surveyed the land, no songs of joy rose from their lips. Instead, a question lingered in the air: what have we done? Picture the scene, my dear ones, the earth scarred by war, the homes of Benjamin reduced to ashes, the lives of countless sons and daughters lost to the sword. The concubine's death had sparked this fire, but the flames had consumed far more than the guilty. The tribe of Benjamin, once a proud part of Israel's covenant, now teetered on the edge of extinction. And the victors, those who had fought for justice, found no peace in their triumph, only the weight of a nation divided against itself. Oh, how this wounds the heart! The tribes had sought to right a wrong, to answer cruelty with punishment. But in their zeal, they had torn the fabric of their people, leaving a wound far deeper than the one they sought to heal. As they gathered at Mizpah once more, their voices were no longer filled with anger but with sorrow. How has it come to this? They asked. How have we, the children of God's promise, brought such ruin upon our own? My friends, this is a moment to pause and reflect, not only on the story of Israel but on our own lives. How often do we, in our pursuit of justice, risk losing sight of the mercy that binds us together? How often do we seek to mend a broken world with force only to find that we have shattered it further? The victory over Benjamin was no victory at all. It was a mirror held before Israel, revealing the cost of vengeance unchecked by love. Yet, even in this moment of desolation, the light of God's grace begins to flicker. The tribes, looking upon the ruins, felt a stirring in their hearts, not of pride, but of regret, not of division, but of a longing to restore what was lost. Benjamin is our brother, they said. We cannot let this wound destroy us forever. And so they began to ask, how can we rebuild? How can we heal a nation broken by its own hand? This, my dear ones, is the turning point of our story, not the clash of armies, but the quiet moment when hearts turn toward reconciliation. The tribes resolved to find a way to preserve Benjamin, to bring their brothers back into the fold of Israel. It was not an easy path, for the scars of war do not fade quickly, and the memory of Gibeah's evil lingered still. But they chose to seek a future where mercy could triumph over judgment, where unity could rise from division. Let us hold this choice close, my friends, for it speaks to us today. In our world, where conflicts rage and wounds fester, we are tempted to answer evil with more evil, to meet hatred with hatred. But God calls us to a different way, a way of courage, where we dare to forgive, to rebuild, to love even those who have wronged us. The concubine's death was a tragedy, the war that followed a catastrophe, but the story does not end in ashes. It points us toward a hope that endures. As we move forward, let us carry this question in our hearts. Can we, like Israel, find the strength to heal what is broken? Can we choose mercy over vengeance, love over division? The path is not easy, but it is the path of God, who never abandons His people even in their darkest hour. Together, let us walk toward that light, trusting that from the ruins a new beginning can arise. As we gather once more around this sacred story, we find ourselves standing not amidst the clash of swords, but in the quiet aftermath of a nation's sorrow. The war against Benjamin has ended, leaving Israel victorious yet broken, their triumph marred by the loss of so many lives and the near destruction of one of their own tribes. But it is here, in the ruins of what was, that we see the faint stirrings of hope, a hope rooted not in power, but in the courage to heal, to forgive, and to rebuild. Let us walk this path together, seeking the wisdom that God offers in even the most painful of moments. The elders of Israel, their hearts heavy with the cost of their vengeance, looked upon the desolation of Benjamin and wept. "One of our tribes is nearly lost," they said. "How can we be whole when our brother lies in ruin?" Their tears were not for victory, but for the realization that their anger had deepened the wound they sought to mend. The concubine's death had sparked a fire, and though the guilty had been punished, the flames had consumed the innocent alongside them. Yet, my friends, it is in this moment of regret that we see the hand of God at work, not in the thunder of battle, but in the gentle call to restore what was broken. The tribes gathered again, their voices no longer raised in war cries, but in a shared longing for unity. "We must find a way," they resolved, "to bring Benjamin back into the fold, to ensure that no tribe is lost from Israel's covenant." This was no simple task, my dear ones. The scars of war were fresh, the memory of Gibeah's evil still raw. How does one rebuild trust when blood has been spilled? How does one offer forgiveness when the heart still aches with grief? The tribes faced a choice, not between victory and defeat, but between division and reconciliation, between clinging to pain and daring to love again. In their wisdom, they sought a path forward, though it was fraught with complexity. They vowed not to give their daughters in marriage to Benjamin, a sign of the wound that lingered. Yet, in their mercy, they found ways to ensure Benjamin's survival, through compassion, through compromise, through acts that, however imperfect, reflected a desire to heal rather than destroy. Women were brought from other places, lives were spared, and slowly, the tribe of Benjamin began to rise from its ashes. Oh, my friends, how this speaks to us today. The story of Gibeah is not merely a tale of crime and punishment, it is a mirror for our own struggles to mend what is broken in our world. When we are divided, when we are wounded by the actions of others, our instinct is to build walls, to hold fast to our pain. But God calls us to a higher way, a way of mercy where we dare to see the humanity in those who have wronged us, where we seek not to erase the past but to redeem it through love. The restoration of Benjamin was not perfect, my dear ones. The choices made were marked by the flaws of a people still learning to live as God's own. Yet, in their effort, we see a truth that endures. Healing begins when we choose to act with compassion, even when it is difficult, even when it costs us something of ourselves. The concubine's death was a tragedy, the war a catastrophe, but the story points us toward a greater hope that even in our brokenness, we can build anew. Let us pause here, my friends, and ask ourselves, where in our lives are we called to heal rather than harm? Where are we invited to forgive rather than condemn? The path of reconciliation is not easy. It demands humility, patience, and a heart open to God's grace. But it is the path that leads to life. To a world where no one is cast out, where every soul is cherished as part of God's family. As we prepare to draw this story to a close, let us carry this hope forward. The wounds of Gibeah, of Benjamin, of Israel are not the end. They are a call to us to live with justice tempered by mercy, to build communities rooted in love, and to trust that God is with us, guiding us toward a future where all are made whole. We have journeyed together through a story that has stirred our hearts and challenged our souls, a story of tragedy, vengeance, and the fragile hope of healing. The tale of Gibeah, found in the sacred pages of Judges, is not an easy one to hear. It speaks of a woman betrayed, a nation divided, and a people who, in their pursuit of justice, nearly lost themselves to the fire of their own anger. Yet, as we draw this story to a close, let us not turn away in despair, but lift our eyes to the light that God offers even in the darkest of times. The tribes of Israel, having fought and wept, stood at a crossroads. The concubine's death had awakened them to the evil in their midst, but it was their choice to rebuild Benjamin, to seek reconciliation despite their pain, that points us toward the heart of this story. They did not erase the wounds of Gibeah, such wounds cannot be undone. But they chose to plant seeds of mercy, to weave a future where division might give way to unity, where the covenant of God's people could be renewed. Oh, my friends, what does this teach us today? The story of Judges is not merely a record of Israel's past, it is a mirror for our own lives, our own world. We, too, live in times of chaos where injustice wounds the vulnerable, where anger divides communities, where the cry for justice can so easily become a call for vengeance. But God calls us to a different path, a path where justice is tempered by love, where healing comes not from tearing down but from lifting up, where every soul is seen as precious in His eyes. Consider the concubine, my dear ones. She was cast out, her voice silenced, her life taken by cruelty. She reminds us of every person who suffers in the shadows, those who are forgotten, those who are pushed aside, those who bear the weight of a world that has lost its way. Her story asks us, will we stand by, silent as the Levite was, or will we raise our voices for those who cannot speak? Will we offer shelter, as the old man tried, or will we build a world where no one is left to face the darkness alone? And consider the tribes who in their zeal nearly destroyed their own. They remind us that justice, when pursued without mercy, can deepen the very wounds we seek to heal. Their war against Benjamin was a cry for rightness, but it was their turn toward compassion that opened the door to a new beginning. So, too, must we ask ourselves, when we are wronged, will we cling to anger, or will we dare to forgive? When we see evil, will we answer with division, or will we work to build bridges of understanding? My friends, this story is a warning and a promise. It warns us of what happens when we drift from God's love, when we let chaos reign, when we forget the sacred dignity of every person, when we choose vengeance over mercy. In the days of Judges, Israel had no king, and each did what was right in their own eyes. The result was Gibeah, a city where hospitality turned to horror, where a woman's life was traded for safety, where a nation's anger nearly consumed it whole. But the promise, my dear ones, is that we are not bound to repeat this story. We have a king, not of earthly power, but of divine love, who guides us with a law written on our hearts, to love one another as He loves us. With His grace, we can build a world where no one is cast out, where justice flows like a river, where mercy heals what vengeance cannot. So I ask you, my friends, to carry this story with you. Let it be a reminder that every choice matters, every act of kindness, every stand for justice, every moment of forgiveness. Let it inspire you to look upon those around you, your neighbors, your enemies, the stranger at your gate, and see them as God sees them, as brothers and sisters in His family. What will you do with this story? Will you let it stir your heart to act with courage, to speak with compassion, to live with integrity? Will you work to build a world where the horrors of Gibeah are no more, where every soul finds a place of safety and love? The future is not written by the past, but by the choices we make today, by the love we show, by the mercy we extend. As we part from this tale, let us pray together for the strength to walk this path. May God grant us the wisdom to seek justice with humility, the courage to heal what is broken, and the love to see His face in every person we meet. May we live as lights in the darkness, building a world where peace reigns, where hope endures, and where the story of Gibeah becomes a memory transformed by grace. Go forth, my friends, with hearts full of hope. Live with justice, love with mercy, and trust that God is with you, guiding you toward a future where all are made whole. Amen.